As we mourn the tragic loss of life in Israel and Gaza, the Prime Minister reminded us last week of the need to fight extremism and heal divisions. So I start today by remembering the Muslims who died in 2 world wars in the service of freedom and democracy. We need a memorial to honour them, so following representations from the Right Honourable Member for Bromsgrove and others, I've decided to allocate £1 million towards the cost of building one. Whatever your faith or colour or class, this country will never forget the sacrifices made for our future. Madam Deputy Speaker, in recent times the UK and the UK economy has dealt with a financial crisis, a pandemic and an energy shock caused by war in Europe. Yet despite the most challenging economic headwinds in modern history, under Conservative government since 2010, growth has been higher than every large European economy. Unemployment has halved, absolute poverty has gone down, and there are 800 more people in jobs for every single day that we've been in office. Of course, interest rates remain high as we bring down inflation. But because of the progress we've made, because we are delivering the Prime Minister's economic priorities, we can now help families not just with temporary cost of living support, but with permanent cuts in taxation. We do this to give much needed help in challenging times, but also because Conservatives know lower taxes mean higher growth. And higher growth means more opportunity, more prosperity, and more funding for our precious public services. But if we want that growth...
What? The Chancellor has hardly said anything. Order! You can't get excited yet. Now, other people want to hear what the Chancellor has to say, and it's matters. So we'll have a bit of good behaviour, please. Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If we want that growth to lead to higher wages and higher living standards for every family in every corner of the country, it cannot come from unlimited migration. It can only come by building a high-wage, high-skill economy, not just higher GDP, but higher GDP per head. And that is the difference with the party opposite. Their plans destroy jobs, reduce opportunities, and risk family finances with spending that pushes up taxes. Instead of going back to square one, the policies I announced today mean more investment, more jobs, better public services and lower taxes in a budget for long-term growth. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I start with the updated forecasts from the OBR, for which I thank Richard Hughes and his team. First, inflation. When the Prime Minister and I came to office, it was 11%. The latest figures show... I know the party opposite struck...
No, this is not amusing anymore. We need to hear what the Chancellor has to say. I can tell who's making the noise, and you simply won't get a chance to speak later. So that's the end of it. Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When the Prime Minister and I came to office, inflation was 11%, but the latest figures show it is now 4%, more than meeting our pledge to halve it last year. And today's forecasts from the OBR show it falling below the 2% target in just a few months' time, nearly a whole year earlier than forecast in the autumn statement. That didn't happen by accident. Whatever the pressures and whatever the politics, a Conservative government working with the Bank of England will always put sound money first. also understand that tackling inflation, while necessary, is painful. It means higher interest rates and a period of lower growth. So we've given the average household £3,400 in cost of living support over the last 2 years. Doing so makes economic as well as moral sense. The OBR predicted real household disposable income per person would fall by 2% in the last year. Instead, after this support, it is on track to rise by 0.8%. And today I take further steps to help families with cost of living pressures, starting with measures to help the poorest families. We've already abolished higher charges for electricity paid by those on prepayment meters, increased the local housing allowance, and raised benefits by double expected inflation. Today I focus on those falling into debt. Nearly 1 million households on universal credit take out budgeting advance loans to pay for more expensive emergencies like boiler repairs or help getting a job. To help make such loans more affordable, I've today decided to increase the repayment period for new loans from 12 months to 24 months. For some people, I thought they cared about people on the lowest incomes. But trust the Labour Party not to want to hear about debt. For some people, the best way to resolve debt is through a debt relief order. But getting one costs £90, which can deter the very people who need them the most. So having listened carefully to representations from citizens' advice, I today relieve pressure on around 40,000 families every year by abolishing the £90 charge completely. Next, the Household Support Fund. It was set up on a temporary basis and due to conclude at the end of this month. Having listened carefully to representations from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the Trussell Trust, and honourable members from East Ham, Colchester, Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner, and Suffolk Coastal, amongst others, I've decided that with the battle against inflation still not over, now is not the time to stop the targeted help it offers. We will therefore continue it at current levels for another 6 months. Next, I turn to a measure that will help businesses and households more broadly. In the autumn statement, I froze alcohol duty until August of this year. Without any action today, it would have been due to rise by 3%. But I've listened carefully to my right honourable friends from Altrincham and Sale West, the Vale of Glamorgan, and my right honourable friend from Murray, who is a formidable champion of the Scottish whisky industry. I also listened to Councillor John Tonks from Ash, a strong supporter of the wonderful Admiral pub, who pointed out the pressures facing the industry. So today I've decided to extend the alcohol duty freeze until February 2025. This benefits 38,000 pubs across the UK, and on top of the £13,000 saving a typical pub will get from the 75% business rates discount I announced in the autumn. We value our hospitality industry and are backing the great British pub. Another cost that families and businesses worry about is fuel. Now, the Shadow Chancellor complained about the freeze on fuel duty, and Labour has opposed it at every opportunity. The Labour Mayor of London wants to punish motorists even more with his ULEZ plans, but lots of families and sole traders depend on their car. If I did nothing, fuel duty would increase by 13% this month. So instead, I've listened to my right honourable friends for Stoke-on-Trent North, Dudley North, Witham and others, as well as the Sun newspaper's Keep It Down campaign. I have, as a result, decided to maintain the 5p cut and freeze fuel duty for another 12 months. This will save the average car driver £50 next year and bring total savings since the 5p cut was introduced to around £250. Taken together with the alcohol duty freeze, this decision also reduces headline inflation by 0.2 percentage points in 24/5, allowing us to make faster progress towards the Bank of England's 2% target. Madam Deputy Speaker, there can be no solid growth without solid finances. An economy based on sound money does not pass its bills to the next generation. When it comes to borrowing, some believe there is a trade-off between compassion and fiscal responsibility. They are wrong. It is only because we responsibly reduced the deficit by 80% between 2010 and 2019 that we could provide £370 billion to help businesses and families in the pandemic. The party opposite opposed our plans to reduce the deficit every single step of the way. But in fairness, they were consistent. The Lib Dems supported controlling spending in coalition, but now say they would prop up a party that will turn on the spending taps. It's the difference between no plan and no principles. And I'm delighted the right honourable gentleman from the Lib Dems was here to hear it for once. Today, we say something different. There is nothing compassionate about running out of money. With the pandemic behind us, we must once again be responsible and build up our resilience to future shocks. That means bringing down borrowing so we can start to reduce our debt. And today's figures confirm that is happening. Ahead of my first autumn statement in 22, the OBR forecast headline debt would rise to above 100% of GDP. Today, they will say it will fall in every year to just 94% by 28-29. Underlying debt, which excludes Bank of England debt, will be 91.7% in 24/5, according to the OBR, then 92.8%, 93.2%, 93.2% before falling to 92.9% in 28-29, with final year headroom against debt falling of £8.9 billion. Our underlying debt is therefore on track to fall as a share of GDP, meeting our fiscal rule. And we continue to have the second lowest level of government debt in the G7, lower than Japan, France or the United States. We also meet our second fiscal rule for public sector borrowing to be below 3% of GDP 3 years early. Borrowing falls from 4.2% of GDP in 23/4 to 3.1%, 2.7%, 2.3%, 1.6% and 1.2% in 2028-29. By the end of the forecast, borrowing is at its lowest level of GDP since 2001. None of that, of course, would be possible if Labour implemented their pledge to decarbonise the grid 5 years early by 2030. By their own calculations, that costs £28 billion a year to do. But last month, after flip-flopping for months, they said they're not going to spend the £28 billion after all, but somehow they'll meet their pledge. Somehow, Madam Deputy Speaker, can only mean one thing: tax rises on working families. Same old Labour. Today, in contrast, a Conservative government brings down taxes with borrowing broadly unchanged. In fact, borrowing is slightly lower than the autumn statement. And the fact that we are bringing borrowing down is something of particular importance to one very special person. Sir Robert Stamen is the outgoing Chief Executive of the Government's Debt Management Office. And after 20 years of exceptional public service, he is in the gallery. Thank you, Sir Robert. I now turn to growth. Just after I became Chancellor, the OBR expected GDP to fall by 1.4% in the following year. In fact, it grew, albeit slowly. Now the OBR expects the economy to grow by 0.8% this year and 1.9% next year, 0.5% higher than their autumn forecast. After that, growth rises to 2.2%, 1.8% and 1.7% in 2028. Since 2010, they don't want to hear this, but these are the facts. Since 2010, we have grown faster than Germany, France or Italy, the three largest European economies. And according to the IMF, we will continue to grow faster than all three of them in the 5 years ahead. Surveys by Lloyds and Deloitte show business confidence is returning. In other words, because we have turned the corner on inflation, we will soon turn the corner on growth. And today's OBR forecasts also show that we have made good progress on the Prime Minister's three economic priorities. Compared to when the three pledges were made, inflation has halved, debt is falling in line with our fiscal rules, and growth is fully 1.5 percentage points higher than predicted. And as growth returns, they don't have a growth plan, so they might as well listen to ours. As growth returns, our plan is for economic growth not sustained through migration, but one that raises wages and living standards for families. Not just higher GDP, but higher GDP per head, and that means sticking to our plan with a budget for long-term growth, more investment, more jobs, better public services and lower taxes. And I start with investment. Economists say that stimulating investment is the most effective way to raise productivity and therefore wages and living standards. Since 2010, we've been doing just that. Business, well, you might want to listen to what I'm about to say because business investment has risen from an average of 9.3% of GDP under Labour to 9.9% under the Conservatives. And this year it will be 10.6% of GDP. That is £30 billion more business investment than if it had continued at Labour levels. And it's still going up. In the short period since the autumn statement, Nissan have announced they'll build 2 new electric car models in the UK. Microsoft and Google have announced data centres worth over £3 billion. Thanks to my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, the Global Investment Summit unlocked £30 billion of investment. In fact, since 2010, greenfield foreign direct investment has been higher than anywhere else in Europe. And for the last 3 years, we have been the third highest in the world after the United States and China. And we're not stopping there. In the autumn statement, I announced we would introduce permanent full expensing, a £10 billion tax cut for businesses that gives the UK the most attractive investment tax regime of any large European or G7 country. It was welcomed by over 200 business leaders, with the CBI saying it was a game changer and the single most transformational thing we could do to fire up the British economy. And today I take further steps to boost investment. Having listened to calls from the CBI, Make UK and the BCC, we'll shortly publish draft legislation for full expensing to apply to leased assets, a change I intend to bring in as soon as it's affordable. We'll also help small businesses, something close to my own heart, as well as the business rate support and work on prompt payments I announced in the autumn. I'll provide £200 million of funding to extend the recovery loan scheme as it transitions to the growth guarantee scheme, helping 11,000 SMEs access the finance they need. And following representations from the Federation of Small Business, as well as honourable members for Loughborough, Southend West and Rother Valley, I will reduce the administrative and financial impact of VAT by increasing the VAT registration threshold from £85,000 to £90,000 from April the 1st, the first increase in 7 years. That will bring tens of thousands of businesses out of paying VAT altogether and encourage many more to invest and grow. I now move to measures to address historic underinvestment in our nations and regions. Since we started levelling up, Since we started levelling up in 2019, 2/3 of all new salaried jobs have been created outside London and the South East. We've announced 13 investment zones and 12 free ports, which continue to attract investment, including recently, thanks to the efforts of Mayor Ben Houchen from the Numa Group, who are investing £15 million into the Tees Valley investment zone. Today, working with the Levelling Up Secretary, I devolve further power to local leaders who are best placed to promote growth in their areas. I can announce the North East Trailblazer devolution deal, providing a package of support for the region potentially worth over £100 million. I'll devolve powers to Buckinghamshire, Warwickshire, and to the most beautiful county in England, Surrey. I see the Leader of the Opposition smiling because, like me, he is a Surrey boy. I know he's been taking advice from Lord Mandelson, who yesterday rather uncharitably said he needed to shed a few pounds. Ordinary families will shed more than a few pounds if that lot get in. Today, if he wants to join me on my marathon training, he's most welcome as well. Today, we continue to spread opportunity throughout the country by allocating £100 million of levelling up funding to areas including High Peak, Dundee, Conway, Erewash, Redditch and Coventry to support cultural projects in these communities, alongside support for capital projects across the country, including in Bingley. We are expanding the long-term plan for towns to 20 new places, including Darlington, home of the Treasury's fantastic Darlington Economic Campus, Coleraine, Peterhead, Runcorn, Harlow, Eastbourne, Arbroath and Rhyl, providing each with £20 million of funding to invest in community regeneration over the next decade. We'll provide £15 million in new funding to the West Midlands Combined Authority to support culture, heritage and investment projects on the recommendation of our go-getting Mayor Andy Street. And we'll allocate £5 million to renovate hundreds of local village halls across England so they can remain at the heart of their communities. And because this is a Conservative and Unionist government, we'll also set aside funding to support the Saxavord Spaceport in Shetland, an agri-food launchpad in mid-Wales, and funding to support Northern Ireland's businesses to expand global trade and investment opportunities. As a result of the decisions we take today, the Scottish Government will receive nearly £300 million in Barnet consequentials, with nearly £170 million for the Welsh Government and £100 million for the Northern Ireland Executive. I do appreciate that a tax-cutting budget is very uncomfortable for the biggest tax risers in the United Kingdom. We also want to level up opportunity across the generations, including building more houses for young people, and we're on track to deliver over 1 million homes in this Parliament. Last week, the Levelling Up Secretary allocated £188 million to support projects in Sheffield, Blackpool and Liverpool, and today I go further, allocating £242 million of investments in Barking Riverside and Canary Wharf, which together will build nearly 8,000 houses, as well as transforming Canary Wharf into a new hub for life science companies. We're launching a new £20 million community-led housing scheme supporting local communities to deliver the developments they want and need, and I'm pleased to announce the next steps for Cambridge to reach its potential to be the world's leading scientific powerhouse. I confirm there will be a long-term funding settlement for the Future Development Corporation in Cambridge at the next spending review, with over £10 million invested in the coming year to unlock delivery of crucial local transport and health infrastructure. The final levelling up measures I announced today support North Wales, where I have many happy childhood memories, in mould, following representations from the Honourable Member for the Vale of Clwyd. We will help fund the renovation of Theatre Clwyd. And I can announce this week the Government has reached agreement on a £160 million deal with Hitachi to purchase the Wilfer site in Innismore and the Oldbury site in South Gloucestershire. Innismore has a vital role in delivering our nuclear ambitions, and no one should take more credit for today's announcement than my tireless, tenacious and turbocharged honourable friend Innismore. More investment by large businesses, more support for small businesses, promoting investment in our nations and regions, all part of a budget for long-term growth that sticks to our plan to deliver more jobs, better public services and lower taxes. I now turn to one of the most powerful ways to attract investment, namely supporting our most innovative industries. Outside the US, we have the most respected universities, the biggest financial services sector, and the largest tech ecosystem in Europe. We have double the AI startups of anywhere in Europe, double the venture capital investment, and a tech economy now double the size of Germany and 3 times the size of France. We're on track to become the world's next Silicon Valley. In today's budget for long-term growth, I take further steps to attract investment into our technology-related industries. I want our brilliant tech entrepreneurs not just to start here, but to stay here, including when the time comes for a stock market listing. So we'll build on the Edinburgh and Mansion House reforms to unlock more pension fund capital. We'll give new powers to the Pensions Regulator and Financial Conduct Authority to ensure better value from defined contribution schemes by judging performance on overall returns, not cost. We'll make sure there are vehicles to make it easier for pension funds to invest in UK growth opportunities. So I'm today publishing the names of the winners of the LIFTS competition. But I remain concerned that other markets, such as Australia, generate better returns for pension savers with more effective investment strategies and more investment in high-quality domestic growth stocks. So I will introduce new requirements for DC and local government pension funds to disclose publicly their level of international and UK equity investment, and I'll then consider what further action should be taken if we're not on a positive trajectory towards international best practice. I also want to create opportunities for a new generation of retail investors to engage with public markets. So we'll proceed with the retail sale for part of the government's remaining NatWest shares this summer, at the earliest opportunity, subject to supportive market conditions and value for money. We'll continue to explore how savers could be allowed to take their pension pots with them when they change job. We'll make it easier for people to save for the long term with a new British savings bond delivered through National Savings and Investment, offering savers a guaranteed rate fixed for 3 years. And today, following calls from over 200 representatives of the city and our high-growth sectors, I will reform the ISA system to encourage more people to invest in UK assets. After a consultation on its implementation, I will introduce a brand new British ISA, which will allow an additional £5,000 annual investment for investments in UK equity with all the tax advantages of other ISAs. And this will be on top of the existing ISA allowances, ensure British savers can benefit from the growth of the most promising UK businesses, as well as supporting those businesses with the capital to expand. And I turn now to our other growth industries, starting with clean energy. We want nuclear to provide up to a quarter of our electricity by 2050. And as part of that, I want the UK to lead the global race in developing cutting-edge nuclear technologies. I can therefore announce that Great British Nuclear will begin the next phase of the small modular reactor selection process, with companies now having until June to submit their initial tender responses. Our brilliant Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary will also allocate up to £120 million more to the Green Industries Growth Accelerator to build supply chains for new technology ranging from offshore wind to carbon capture and storage. By January of next year, as promised in the autumn statement, we'll have a new faster connections process to the grid up and running. In advanced manufacturing, we've announced a further £270 million of investment into innovative new automotive and aerospace R&D projects, building the UK's capabilities in zero-emission vehicle and clean aviation technologies. And I now turn to our creative industries. We have become Europe's largest film and TV production centre, with Idris Elba, Keira Knightley and Orlando Bloom all filming their latest productions here. Studio space in the UK has doubled in the last 3 years, and at the current rate of expansion, next year we will be second only to Hollywood globally. In the autumn statement, I committed to providing more tax relief for visual effects in film and high-end TV. I can today confirm that we will increase the rate of tax credit by 5% and remove the 80% cap for visual effects costs in the audiovisual expenditure credit. Having worked closely with the Culture Secretary and listened carefully to representations from companies like Pinewood, Warner Brothers and Sky Studios, we'll provide eligible film studios in England with a 40% relief on their gross business rates until 2034. And having heard representations from the British Film Industry Pact and indeed the Prime Minister, we will introduce a new tax credit for UK independent films with a budget of less than £15 million. For our creative industries more broadly, we will provide £26 million of funding to our preeminent theatre, the National Theatre, to upgrade its stages. And today I particularly want to recognise the contribution of our creative industries and the tourism that comes from orchestras, museums, galleries and theatres. In the pandemic, we introduced higher 45% and 50% levels of tax relief, which were due to end in March 25. They have been a lifeline for performing arts across the country. Today, in recognition of their vital importance to our national life, I can announce I am making those tax reliefs permanent at 45% for touring and orchestral productions and 40% for non-touring productions. Lord Lloyd Webber says this will be a once-in-a-generation transformational change that will ensure Britain remains the global capital of creativity. I suspect the new theatre reliefs may be of particular interest to the Shadow Chancellor, who seems to fancy her thespian skills when it comes to acting like a Tory. The trouble is, we all know how her show ends. Higher taxes, like every Labour government in history. I'm delighted they are cheering the fact that Labour governments always put up taxes. They're right. And I also want to mention our life sciences sector, where we will support research by medical charities into diseases such as cancer, dementia and epilepsy, with an additional £45 million, including £3 million for Cancer Research UK. But I have long believed we should be manufacturing medicines as well as developing them. So I can today also announce a brand new investment by one of our greatest life science companies, AstraZeneca, led by mon ami, the irrepressible Sir Pascal Soriot. AstraZeneca made their COVID vaccine available to developing countries at cost, as a result saving over 6 million lives. And today, because of the government's support for the life sciences sector, they announced plans to invest £650 million in the UK to expand their footprint on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus and fund the building of a vaccine manufacturing hub in Speke in Liverpool. More investment, better jobs in every corner of the country in a long-term budget for growth from a Conservative government. One of the biggest barriers to investment is businesses not being able to hire the staff they need. The economy today has around 900,000 vacancies. It would be easy to fill them with higher migration, but with over 10 million adults of working age who are not in work, that would be economically and morally wrong. Those who can work should. And this is an issue that I have tackled in every budget and autumn statement I've delivered. A year ago, I abolished the pensions lifetime allowance, which pushed doctors and others to take early retirement. Ask any doctor what they think about Labour's plans to bring it back, and they will say, don't go back to square one. In the autumn, with the help of our superb Work and Pensions Secretary, we announced the Back to Work plan, which will support 1 million adults with medical conditions and reduce the number of people assessed as not needing to work by 2/3. A year ago, I also announced the biggest ever expansion of childcare, extending the 30-hour free childcare offer. Just listen. Extending the 30-hour free childcare offer to all children of working parents from 9 months. We've not had a childcare plan from Labour, so you might want to listen to ours. Our plan will mean an extra 60,000 parents enter the workforce in the next 4 years, a tremendous achievement for the Education Secretary, who I think is doing an effing good job. And today, following representations from many people, including the CBI, I announced measures to support the childcare sector make the new investments it now needs to. So I am guaranteeing the rates that will be paid to childcare providers to deliver our landmark offer for children over 9 months old for the next 2 years. That is more people in work, more jobs, sticking to our plan in a long-term budget for growth. And I now turn to public services. I thought they were supposed to be interested in public services. I can wait.
Order. A little bit of murmuring is normal. I shouldn't be able to hear what you're saying over there. That is clearly out of order. Now, let's have some courtesy. Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Good public services need a strong economy to pay for them. But a strong economy also needs good public services. In 2010, schools in the UK were behind Germany, France and Sweden in the OECD's PISA education rankings for reading and maths. Now, after Conservative reforms, we are ahead of them. Burglaries and violent crime have halved in the last 14 years after we invested in 20,000 more police officers. Our armed forces remain the most professional and best funded in Europe, with defence spending already more than 2% of GDP. We're providing more military support to Ukraine than nearly any other country, and our spending will rise to 2.5% as soon as economic conditions allow. The NHS is still recovering from the pandemic, but has 42,000 more doctors and 71,000 more nurses than it did under Labour. That is 250 more doctors and 400 more nurses for every single month that we've been in office. Now, resources matter, of course, which is why, despite all the economic shocks we have faced, overall spending on public services has gone up since 2010, in the case of the NHS by more than a third in real terms. But although spending has continued to rise every year, public sector productivity still remains below pre-pandemic levels by nearly 6%. This demonstrates that the way to improve public services is not always more money or more people. We also need to run them more efficiently. We need a more productive state, not a bigger state. In autumn 2022, I set day-to-day spending to increase by 1% a year in real terms over the next Parliament. Some say that's not enough and we should raise spending by more. Others say it's too much and we should cut it to improve efficiency. Neither are right. It's not fair to ask taxpayers to pay for more, when public service productivity has fallen. Nor would it be wise to reduce that funding given the pressures public services face. So I'm keeping the planned growth in day-to-day spending at 1% in real terms, but we are going to spend it better. So today, they don't have a plan for public services like everything else. So why not listen to ours? Today I am announcing a landmark public sector productivity plan that restarts public service reform and changes the Treasury's traditional approach to public spending. And I start with our biggest and most important public service, the NHS. One of my greatest privileges was to be Health Secretary. Thanks to the NHS, I have 3 gorgeous children, the oldest of whom has been patiently listening in the gallery. The NHS is rightly the biggest reason most of us are proud to be British, but the systems that support its staff are often antiquated. Doctors, nurses and ward staff spend hours every day filling out forms when they could be...
Mr. Streeting,
when patients don't show up...
I don't like to interrupt the Chancellor. You're too close to me to be shouting that loudly. If you want to shout that loudly, you should come sit away up there. I apologise for interrupting the Chancellor.
When patients don't show up, or one member of a team is ill, operating theatres are left empty despite long waiting lists. Now, when we published the NHS long-term workforce plan, I asked the NHS to put together a plan to transform its efficiency and productivity. I wanted better care for patients, more job satisfaction for staff, and better value for taxpayers. Making changes on the scale we need is not cheap. The investment needed to modernise NHS IT systems so they're as good as the best in the world costs £3.4 billion. But it helps unlock £35 billion of savings, 10 times that amount. So in today's budget for long-term growth, I have decided to fund the NHS productivity plan in full. Yeah. With that new investment, we will slash the 13 million hours lost by doctors and nurses every year to outdated IT systems. We will cut down and potentially halve form filling by doctors using AI. We will digitise operating theatre processes, allowing the same number of consultants to do an extra 200,000 operations a year. We'll fund improvements to help doctors read MRI and CT scans more accurately and quickly, speeding up results for 130,000 patients every year and saving thousands of lives, something I know would have delighted my brother Charlie, who I recently lost to cancer. We'll improve the NHS app so it can be used to confirm and modify all appointments, reducing up to half 500,000 missed appointments annually and improving patient choice. We'll set up a new NHS staff app to make it easier to roster electronically and end the use of expensive off-framework agencies. And as a result of this funding, all hospitals will use electronic patient records, making the NHS the largest digitally integrated healthcare system in the world. Today's announcement doubles the amount the NHS is investing on digital transformation over 3 years. And on top of this longer-term transformation, we'll also help the NHS meet pressures in the coming year with an additional £2.5 billion. This will allow the NHS to continue its focus on reducing waiting times and brings the total increase in NHS funding since the start of the Parliament to 13% in real terms. The NHS was there for us in the pandemic, and today, with nearly £6 billion of additional funding, a Conservative government is there for the NHS. The head of the NHS, Amanda Pritchard, today says that this investment shows the government continues to back the NHS. She says that as a result of it, the NHS can commit to delivering 1.9% annual productivity growth over the next Parliament, more than double the average productivity growth in public services between 2010 and 2019. But today is not just about the NHS. I want this groundbreaking agreement with the NHS to be a model for all our public services. Across education, the police, the courts and local government, I want to see more efficient, better value and higher quality public services. So today I can announce that in the next spending review, the Treasury will do things differently. We will prioritise proposals that deliver annual savings within 5 years, equivalent to the total cost of the investment required. And today we make a start with some excellent proposals. Violence reduction units and hotspot policing have prevented an estimated 136,000 knife crimes and other violent offences, as well as over 3,000 hospital admissions. Every crime costs money, so we will provide £75 million to roll that model out in England and Wales. Police officers waste around 8 hours a week on unnecessary admin. With higher productivity, we could free the equivalent of 20,000 police officers over a year. So we will spend £230 million rolling out time and money-saving technology, which speeds up police response times by allowing people to report crimes by video call and, where appropriate, use drones as first responders. Too many legal cases, particularly in family law, should never go to court, and it would cost us less if they didn't. So we'll spend £170 million to fund non-court resolution, reduce reoffending and digitise the court process. Too many children in care end up being looked after by unregistered providers that are much more expensive. So we'll invest £165 million over the next 4 years to reduce that cost by increasing the capacity of the Children's Homes estate. Special education need provision can be excellent when outsourced to independent sector schools, but also expensive. So we'll invest £105 million over the next 4 years to build 50 new special free schools to create additional high-quality places and increase choice for parents. And we'll also put in place a plan to realise the tens of billions of savings recommended in an excellent speech by the head of the National Audit Office. The OBR say a 5% increase in public sector productivity will be the equivalent of around £20 billion in extra funding. With these plans, we can deliver that and more. And if we ensure they are cash-releasing savings, as we are committed to doing, it will be possible to live with more constrained spending growth without cutting services valued by the public. So with the energy and drive of my talented Chief Secretary to the Treasury, we launch our public sector productivity plan in today's budget for long-term growth, more investment, more jobs, better public services, and one more thing, lower taxes. Keeping taxes down matters to Conservatives in a way it never can for Labour. We believe that in a free society, the money you earn doesn't belong to the government, it belongs to you. And if we want to encourage hard work, we should let people keep as much of their own money as possible. Conservatives look around the world at economies in North America and Asia and notice that countries with lower taxes generally have higher growth. Now, economists argue about cause and correlation, but we know that lower taxed economies have more energy, more dynamism and more innovation, and we know that's Britain's future too. Before I explain how we will bring down taxes, I start with some measures to make our system simpler and fairer. To discourage non-smokers from taking up vaping, we're today confirming the introduction of an excise duty on vaping products from October 26 and publishing a consultation on its design. Because vapes can also play a positive role in helping people quit smoking, We'll introduce a one-off increase in tobacco duty at the same time to maintain the financial incentive to choose vaping over smoking. I'll make a one-off adjustment to rates of air passenger duty on non-economy flights only to account for high inflation in recent years, and I'll provide HMRC with the resources they need to ensure everyone pays the tax they owe, leading to an increase in revenue collected of over £4.5 billion across the forecast period. Next, I turn to property taxation. In recent months, following tenacious representation from the honourable members for St Austell and Newquay, North Devon, cities of London and Westminster, Torbay and Truro and Falmouth, I have been looking closely at our furnished holiday lettings tax regime. I am concerned that this tax regime is creating a distortion, meaning there are not enough properties available for long-term rental by local people. So to make the tax system work better for local communities, I'm going to abolish the furnished holiday lettings regime. I've also been looking at stamp duty relief for people who purchase more than one dwelling in a single transaction, known as multiple dwellings relief. I see the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party paying close attention, given her multiple dwellings.
Order. Too much excitement. We haven't actually heard, because we can't hear what the Chancellor is trying to say. Okay, and I can hear who is shouting there. You won't get to speak later. Chancellor.
I'm sorry to disappoint her, but multiple dwellings relief was not actually designed for her, but intended to... It was intended to support investment in the private rented sector, but an external evaluation found no strong going to abolish it. And finally, as part of this budget, both the Treasury, a part of our look on property taxation, both the Treasury and the OBR have looked at the costs associated with our current levels of capital gains tax on property. They have concluded that if we reduced the higher 28% rate that exists for residential property, we would in fact increase revenues because there would be more transactions. For the first time in history, both the Treasury and the OBR have discovered their inner Laffer curve. So today I'm going to reduce the higher rate of property capital gains tax from 28% to 24%. That really is for you, Angela.
I had enough from over there, definitely not having it from here. Chancellor.
I now turn to oil and gas. Unlike the party opposite, we want to encourage investment in the North Sea, so we will retain generous investment allowances for the sector. We'll also legislate in the finance bill to abolish the energy profits levy should market prices fall to their historic norm for a sustained period of time, after representations from the Honourable Member for Banff and Buchan. But because the increase in energy prices caused by the Ukraine war is expected to last longer, so too will the sector's windfall profits. So I will extend the sunset on the energy profits levy for an additional year to 2029, raising £1.5 billion. Next, I turn to the taxes paid by those who are resident in the UK but not domiciled here for tax purposes. This is a category of people known as non-DOMs. Now, Nigel Lawson wanted to end the non-DOM regime in his great tax reforming budget of 1988, which is where I suspect the Labour Party got the idea from. But I too have always believed that provided we protect the UK's attractiveness to international investors, those with the broadest shoulders should pay their fair share. After looking at the issue over many months, I've concluded that we can indeed introduce a system which is both fairer and remains competitive with other countries. So the government will abolish the current tax system for non-DOMs, get rid of the outdated concept of domicile, and I aim to please all sides of the House in all my budgets. And we will replace...
Order. This is impossible. Right? Can you just... Order! Could you please shout more quietly? Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We will replace the non-DOM regime with a modern, simpler and fairer residency-based system. From April 25, new arrivals to the UK will not be required to pay any tax on foreign income and gains for their first 4 years of UK residency, a more generous regime than at present and one of the most attractive offers in Europe. But after 4 years, those who continue to live in the UK will pay the same tax as other UK residents. Recognising the contribution of many of these individuals to our economy, we will put in place transitional arrangements for those benefiting from the current regime. That will include a 2-year period in which individuals will be encouraged to bring wealth earned overseas to the UK, where it can be spent and invested here, a measure that will attract onshore an additional £15 billion of foreign income and generate more than £1 billion of extra tax. Overall, abolishing non-DOM status will raise £2.7 billion a year by the end of the forecast period. That is money the party opposite planned to use for spending increases, but today a Conservative government makes a different choice. We use that revenue to help cut taxes on working families. And many of those families, Madam Deputy Speaker, depend on child benefit. But the way we treat child benefit in the tax system is confusing and unfair. It's a lifeline for many parents because it helps with the additional costs associated with having children. And when it works, it's good for children, good for parents, and good for the economy because it helps people into work. But we currently withdraw child benefit when one parent earns over £50,000 a year. That means two parents earning £49,000 a year receive the benefit in full, but a household earning a lot less than that does not, if just one parent earns over £50,000. Today, I set out plans to end that unfairness. Doing so requires significant reform to the tax system, including allowing HMRC to collect household-level information. We'll therefore consult on moving the high-income child benefit charge to a household-based system to be introduced by April 2026. But because that is not a quick fix, I make two changes today to make the current system fairer. Following representations from my right honourable friends from Penistone and Stocksbridge, Carshalton and Wallington, Bassetlaw and West Worcestershire, along with many others, I confirm that from this April, the high-income child benefit charge threshold will be raised from £50,000 to £60,000. We will raise the top of the taper, at which it's withdrawn, to £80,000. That means no one earning under £60,000 will pay the charge, taking 170,000 families out of paying it altogether. And because of the higher taper and threshold, nearly 500,000 families with children will save an average of £1,300 next year. According to the OBR, this change will see an increase in hours amongst those already working to the equivalent of 10,000 more people entering the workforce. More investment, more jobs, better public service and lower tax. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is one further set of changes I want to make today. The way we tax people's income is particularly unfair. If you get your income from having a job, you pay two types of tax: national insurance contributions and income tax. If you get it from other sources, you pay only one. This double taxation of work is unfair. The result is a complicated system that penalises work instead of encouraging it. If we are to build a high-wage, high-skill economy not dependent on migration, if we want to encourage people not in work to come back to work, we need a simpler, fairer tax system that makes work pay. That is why I cut national insurance contributions in the autumn. By reducing the penalty on work, the OBR said that tax cut would lead to the equivalent of 94,000 more people in work. In other words, it would fill more than 1 in 10 vacancies throughout the economy. Lower taxes, more jobs and higher growth. Today, because of the progress we have made bringing down inflation, because of the additional investment that is flowing into the economy, because we have a plan for better and more efficient public services, and because we have asked those with the broadest shoulders to pay a bit more.
Order. Mr. Perkins. I can manage, thank you very much. 5 times I've heard what you said. I let you away with it. Now that's enough. One more strike and you're out.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do know how hard it is for them to listen to arguments for lower taxes. But that is the difference. Because we have asked those with the broadest shoulders to pay a bit more, today I go further. From April the 6th, employee national insurance will be cut by another 2p from 10% to 8%. And self-employed national insurance will be cut from 8% to 6%. It means an additional £450 a year for the average employee, or £350 for someone self-employed. When combined with the autumn reductions, it means 27 million employees will get an average tax cut of £900 a year. 2 million self-employed will get a tax cut averaging £650. Changes that make our system simpler and fairer, and changes that grow our economy by rewarding work. The OBR say, when combined with the autumn reduction, our national insurance cuts will mean the equivalent of 200,000 more people in work, filling 1 in 5 vacancies, adding 0.4% to GDP and 0.4% to GDP per head. This is the second fiscal event where we've reduced employee and self-employed national insurance. We've cut it by 1/3 in 6 months without increasing borrowing and without cutting spending on public services. That means the average earner in the UK now has the lowest effective personal tax rate since 1975. Their effective taxes are now lower than in America, France, Germany, or any G7 country, because Conservatives believe that making work pay is of the most fundamental importance, because we believe that the double taxation of work is unfair, Our long-term ambition is to end this unfairness when it is responsible, when it can be achieved without increasing borrowing, when it can be delivered without compromising high-quality public services. We will continue to cut national insurance as we have done today, so we truly make work pay. Madam Deputy Speaker, we stick to our plan with a budget for long-term growth. It delivers more investment, more jobs, better public services and lower taxes. But dynamism in an economy doesn't come from ministers in Whitehall. It comes from the grit and determination of people who take risks, work hard and innovate. Not government policies, but people power. It is to unleash people power that we today put this country back on the path to lower taxes. A plan to grow the economy versus no plan. A plan for better public services versus no plan. A plan to make work pay versus no plan. Growth up, jobs up, taxes down. I commend this statement to the House.